This week on Jerusalem Dateline, the White House confirms President Biden's trip to the Middle East, but questions remain about what will happen during his visit. And Iran removes surveillance cameras at its nuclear sites. What's it hiding? Plus, Nick Vujicic and Israel's astounding center called Shalva to help the disabled. All this and more this week on Jerusalem Dateline. Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. The White House has confirmed that President Joe Biden will travel next month to Israel and Saudi Arabia from July 13th to the 16th. The visit comes at a time of major economic woes for the U.S. and a serious political crisis here in Israel. White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre briefed the White House press corps on Air Force One. With gas prices at historic levels, she downplayed the suggestion that President Biden's visit is about convincing Saudi Arabia to produce more oil.
While energy security is one important issue, it's hardly the only one. Saudi Arabia is the chair of OPEC Plus, as you all know, and it's the largest exporter. Of course, we discuss energy with the Saudi government.
President Biden's relationship with Saudi Arabia has been strained. He released a CIA report blaming the murder of journalist Jamal Khashoggi on the Crown Prince, and during the presidential campaign, called the Desert Kingdom a pariah.
Think about it. He calls them a pariah, says they have very little redeeming social value, but all of a sudden we need him. So please, 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 pump more oil at cheaper prices, he goes to say, right?
Jason Greenblatt, one of the architects behind the Abraham Accords, hopes the White House realizes the role Saudi Arabia plays in the region.
I think they called them a strategic partner in today's White House release about the trip. Saudi Arabia is much more than a strategic partner. They're a key ally. They're key to stability in the Middle East. They're just as Israel is important to the region and its stability, so is Saudi Arabia.
The president is also visiting Israel, and it's been reported he will also visit Eastern Jerusalem. Former Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, says that would be unprecedented.
Something that never happened during a presidential visit. Usually presidents came to Jerusalem and then they went to Ramallah to visit the leader of the Palestinian Authority. But I think it would be a grave mistake if some radical elements around the president will try to drag him to a political dispute with Israel by visiting Palestinian institutions in East Jerusalem.
The Palestinian Authority demands that Eastern Jerusalem will be the capital of a future Palestinian state. Danon says Biden's visit could give Palestinians false hopes about the future of Jerusalem.
The sooner the Palestinians will realize that Jerusalem will stay united forever, the better it will be for them. It is a reality check for them. So let's move on and deal with the other issues that are on the table.
Biden's visit also comes as Prime Minister Naftali Bennett's coalition government is going through a political crisis. With the coalition unraveling, it's possible the government may fall even before President Biden arrives. Well, the head of the UN's nuclear watchdog agency announced Iran is removing more than 24 surveillance cameras from its nuclear sites around the country. The decision means Iran's nuclear program will be more and more hidden from the eyes of the world. The UN chief nuclear monitor called removing the cameras a serious challenge.
Let's hope that emotions, go down a little bit and that we focus again on the problems, because the problems are not disappearing. And if we add to the problems less visibility, less access to the agency, then I don't think we are solving anything. We are aggravating everything.
Even before the cameras were turned off, 30 nations voted to censure Iran after the agency discovered nuclear activities at 3 undeclared sites. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett praised the response.
We see in this decision, on the one hand, the lies and hypocrisy of Iran in the nuclear context and in general. And on the other hand, we see here the correct standing of the countries of the world in distinguishing between good and evil when they say clearly Iran is concealing things.
Bennett's statement came just before meeting with the UAE's Crown Prince, where Iran likely topped their agenda. In the meantime, the IAEA says Iran plans to increase its uranium enrichment with more advanced centrifuges, approaching weapons-grade levels. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers from both parties signed onto legislation regarding Iran's latest moves.
The Defend Act directs the Secretary of Defense to seek to cooperate with allies and partners to identify an architecture and acquisition approach to an integrated air and missile defense system.
Iran's growing missile and drone capabilities are seen as a regional threat.
Many of our allies in the region have missile defense capabilities, whether it's Patriot systems or other things, in Israel with the Iron Dome system, but they aren't integrated. We need to bring those together, and it is U.S. leadership.
As members of the Abraham Accords caucus, the sponsors believe the legislation builds on the agreements.
The key to the Abraham Accords and this new relationship that was fostered through the last administration is really about recognizing between Arab and Jewish states that Iran is the common threat.
One of the architects of those Abraham Accords was Jason Greenblatt. You saw him in our story on President Biden's upcoming Mideast trip. We also talked with Greenblatt about his new book called In the Path of Abraham, how Donald Trump made peace in the Middle East and how to stop Joe Biden from unmaking it. Here's that interview. Jason Greenblatt, great to be with you. You've just written a book called In the Path of Abraham. Tell us about it.
Sure. So what I decided to do is write the piece of history that I was privileged and blessed to participate in. It's who we were, what we learned, and why we did what we did. And as I watch everything unfold now, it's really almost on a week-by-week basis in terms of the news. I'm really glad I did it because so much of what I write about is the top of the news today, other than the U.S. economy, which is in tatters. But other than that, these issues have become more and more important by the week.
Yeah, part of the subtitle is that Joe Biden unmaking what you and many members of the Trump administration did. How are they unmaking what you did?
It's really more of a warning to him not to unmake it and how he could avoid unmaking it. But at the beginning, one example would be he and the administration didn't even want to use the words or the phrase Abraham Accords. That was just inappropriate. At some point, they picked up the ball on the Abraham Accords. They started using the name. And now I think they realize just how important and instrumental it is for security in the region, for the United States of America. And I hope they try to continue to build on it. It remains to be seen what they could build on it. But I think the biggest stumbling block for the region and for building on the Abraham Accords is Iran. We continue to negotiate with them in this weak fashion where they have delegates from other countries speaking on behalf of the United States of America. Generally, this Iranian regime is not only terrible for its people, but they can't be trusted. So I think one of the biggest warnings to the Biden administration is stop with Iran. Unless you could do a serious deal, and the prior deal certainly wasn't a serious deal, it was just kicking the can down the road. They should not be working with Iran in any way, shape, or form. And they should ally themselves with Israel and Saudi Arabia and Qatar and the UAE and others in the region, although some of those countries themselves differ from the United States' approach to Iran. Mm-hmm. But they should sit everybody down and unify the region in their negotiating with Iran.
You know, those negotiations for the renewal of the JCPOA have been stalled for several weeks now. Do you think they will get restarted? It seems the main sticking point is the Biden administration won't remove the IRGC from the foreign terrorist organization.
Well, that was a good move on the Biden administration's part. I give them credit for that. It took them way too long for them to make that decision. But now that they've made the decision not to remove them from the terrorist list, that's a good sign. I don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but the fact that we haven't pulled the plug on the negotiations still is a telling sign that we need to be worried, and we shouldn't give up being vocal about how dangerous it is. I hope that what they don't do is say, we're not removing them from the terrorist list, but we'll continue to negotiate a terrible deal. So we shouldn't take one as a signal to them that we accept the fact that they could go ahead and negotiate and sign something that would be a disaster for the region and ultimately a disaster for the United States.
Coming up, residents of biblical Judea and Samaria are concerned about moves President Biden could make. As the Biden administration proceeds with its Middle East agenda, Israel is seeing a number of changes from when former President Trump held the office. Here's a story we did shortly after Biden took office about the concerns of Israelis living in Judea and Samaria about what it might mean for the biblical heartland. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl explains why.
This is the Psagot Winery, about 10 miles north of Jerusalem.
Jews and wine go together. For us, wine is holy. We have a special blessing for wine. Every event in Jewish life, if you don't have any wine, you don't have the event.
In 2003, Yaakov and Naama Berg started this winery based on ancient tradition. They recently moved to this new site.
At the entrance, we chose to put a little bit of like a small exhibition. You can see here old jars, 3,000 years old. There was a big wine industry on those days. The wine that's produced here were shipped to Rome, to Europe, to Jerusalem.
The winery is in Sha'arei Benjamin, the gates of Benjamin in Judea and Samaria. Some people say the Jewish people don't belong here, but in the Bible, Jonathan, the son of King Saul, fought a famous battle against the Philistines in the valley behind me.
The Trump administration acknowledged Israel's connection to the land. Over a year ago, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State at the time, declared Jewish communities in Judea and Samaria would no longer be considered illegal. The Bergs named a wine after the secretary, and he visited them in November.
When you share common faith, it's very strong. And with faith also you can change the world. And I think President Trump and Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, they changed the history.
Other unprecedented moves included recognizing Jerusalem as Israel's capital and moving the U.S. Embassy there, actions that angered Palestinians, causing them to cut ties with the U.S. President Biden has now restored those relations, as well as unconditional funding to Palestinian refugees. He also plans to return to the old peace process formula.
If someone wants to develop this area, to solve the problem, the way is not to separate Arab and Jews with dividing the area and build borders. The right way, it's like what President Trump did. He talked about let's invest in the area, let's develop the area.
Israel Gantz, governor of the Benjamin Regional Council, says Israel must be the sovereign power here.
We can live and help each other, but we can't agree to take a part of the whole land and give it to someone. You know, God brought us here not to take his holy land and to bring it to someone else.
Berg said Trump had made morality into reality.
President Trump was the first president saying the simple truth. We, the Jewish people, we came back to our homeland after 2,000 years that we've been dreaming, we've been praying.
Coupled with that morality was Trump's business sense.
He says, listen, today it's the best deal. Tomorrow it will be worse. Everybody wants to sign a deal the same day. Nobody can argue the results.
The Bergs Winery produces 750,000 bottles of wine each year, exporting 70% to more than 20 countries. Soon, thanks to the Abraham Accords, there will be one more, the UAE.
Wine represents more than just a drink. It's a culture, something very deep. So I think we have the ability to be very successful in our relationship with the Emirates.
The Accords open the way for business between Israel and several Muslim countries.
It's a history. It's a real change that instead of talking about take this holy land and divide it, which means borders and wars and hospitals, instead of that we are talking about what's common.
Despite the disputed status of Judea and Samaria and the fact that most Muslims don't drink alcohol, the UAE is planning to import Israeli wine. More than 2/3 of the Arab Emirates population is from other countries.
I think we're talking here about connection more than how many bottles of wine I'm going to sell.
Gantz believes the Abraham Accords will bring a better life for Jews and Arabs alike.
Now Abraham Accords talking about prosperity. Everyone that really want to help the people here should invest in this area.
Gantz says the world is focused on this area because it's the heart of the world. Both he and Berg hope Biden will see that the recent changes are working and follow suit. Julie Stahl, CBN News, the Psagot Winery, Judea and Samaria.
Up next, Nick Vujicic and Rabbi Kalman Samuels, two pioneers, share their hearts on helping the least among us. Nick Vujicic has moved audiences around the world with his inspiring story of overcoming the challenge of being born without arms or legs. Earlier this month, Vujicic met with Rabbi Kalman Samuels here in Jerusalem. Samuels brings his own inspiring story of how he and his wife began Shalva, the leading center in Israel working with people with disabilities and their families. Here's our interview with these men of vision and compassion. Nick, first of all, your first visit here to Israel and to Shalva. What's your reaction here to Shalva?
Well, first of all, it's such an honor to meet the founder and the whole vision between him and his wife, and coming from a place where they know how much of a need it is with any family dealing with special needs. And being born without limbs in Australia, I was thankful for my parents who were my heroes, and I'm so glad to meet a modern day hero in Shalva being a shining star, a heroic effort of really making the difference, not making a difference, making the difference as a shining star and on an example on a worldwide scale and level. I am blown away. I am excited to already say that I can't wait to come back, bring my family to show them this incredible facility.
Kalman, what does it mean for you to be here with Nick?
More than I could ever have imagined, and I had imagined a lot. I have listened and watched and been inspired by Nick's words online, and you see that anyone who comes close to Nick, including, we just saw, Shalva youngsters, young adults who work here in our employment area, and one by one, they were curious, but very quickly there were hugs, and there was just a love that you can't make up.
Nick, what kind of message do you want to bring to Shalva and to Israel?
I think this is an example of knowing that every single life has value and full potential, and it does take vision and support and drive to see a vision come to pass. And this being an incredible facility and center for the people to come in and be included with peers as well and young people of Israel to see a wonderful example of knowing that every child here is valued and given the support, and even those young mothers who just gave birth, who needs that therapy, is welcomed in with open arms and helping counsel through those difficult times. I, traveling around the world, have seen a lot, and I am absolutely proud of seeing what's happening here. And the Shalva Band, that's a huge highlight as well, that came from this place to inspire hundreds of millions of lives and people who play the victim card, who it's always someone else's fault. I don't have enough. I wish I could do something with my life. Shalva, as a holistic measure, is really not just coming around those people who are struggling, but really inspiring those who have the inner struggles as well.
How can you see yourselves almost symbiotically partnering together?
I find I'm meeting a kindred spirit, and I can see doing wonderful things to impact the world as we do. It's absolutely changing lives when they come into a center that is so beautiful that one wonders, well, wait a minute, this is all about people with disabilities who are all entitled to the same quality of life. And it forces people to rethink the whole subject of their views of disabilities. Nick, I want to thank you for coming. It's extraordinary to have you here. You, my friend, are a gift to the world, and you, my friend, are the wise man who is using that gift to impact and improve and change people's lives.
I'm so excited, genuinely. I can't wait to break bread and just dream together. But I can't imagine that it would be one of the greatest honors of my life to one day share a stage with the Shalva Band and inspire all young people across Israel and the nations to tune in.
You're here to Israel for the first time. What does it mean to you? What does it feel like?
It's very special that the first city that I go to in Israel is Jerusalem. This is the first official meeting that we have, and so it could not have started off better. My heart is overwhelmed. Many people have seen me online talking to young people about anti-bullying and so on. But I feel in this next chapter of my life, it's really going to be more mission strategically for using all the influence that we have for bridging the world together on the more common factors of life and value of human beings. And so I seriously am excited.
What Nick has just said is something that I sincerely believe in as well. And just as we always say that we look not at disabilities but about abilities, it's wise to recognize differences, but to look at commonalities and common values and go forward for the larger world with those values.
Bravo. Give me a hug.
Coming up, in the fields of biblical Judea and Samaria, picking cherries and having fun. Here's a look at what you can see on our social media. A family enjoying the outdoors and the bounty of Israel. Fruit picking in the biblical land of Israel.
What are you doing?
Come here.
Perhaps when you come to Israel, you'll have time to pick some cherries too. Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. Remember, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube. And you can also access CBN content through our CBN News and other CBN apps. And don't forget to sign up for our email blast so you can continue to receive all of our exciting CBN content. I'm Chris Mitchell. We'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.